The distance reached by the broad jumper depends on the speed of his run and his body height in the air. As soon as the jumper is clear of the takeoff board, he is in a sense a projectile. Until he is back on the ground, his center of gravity will describe the path of a projectile in flight. It is useful then to examine the way in which a projectile's distance is affected by its trajectory, or angle at which it leaves. At an angle of 15 degrees, the relative height and range of the missile are shown by the dotted lines. At 30 degrees, with the same velocity, the distance of the projectile is greatly increased. At 45 degrees, again with the same velocity, a still greater distance is achieved. This trajectory of 45 degrees yields the maximum distance. With a given velocity, a projectile will go twice as far at 45 degrees as it will at 15 degrees. Clearly then, the jumper must get height. Running at close to full speed, a jumper cannot actually achieve a takeoff angle of 45 degrees. He can only work to approach 45 degrees. We can understand this point clearly by examining the way in which trajectory is determined. Let the athlete's forward momentum be represented by the horizontal arrows. He has unlimited run and therefore unlimited time to develop forward momentum. Change in the direction of momentum depends on the force applied, its direction, and the time in which this force is applied. Compared to the time of the forward run, the time in which upward force can be applied is very brief. The conclusion is of great significance. Remember, we have seen that a jumper running at nearly full speed cannot achieve a takeoff angle of 45 degrees. This means that the jumper who is running fast always benefits from increased height. The champion may use a run of 130 feet. The average high school jumper will start with about 100 feet. Speed is, of course, important. In general, the faster the athlete is moving, the farther he will jump. But a float is needed. Several or more strides away from the board, the jumper makes no further effort to accelerate his run. In these last strides, he tries to relax and at the same time maintain forward velocity. The float is the preparation for the all-important lift. During the float, concentration is entirely on lift. Note the change in body angle from the usual forward position of the sprinter. This erect body position puts the center of gravity behind the foot and gives the jumper more time to exert an upward force. Notice also there is no foot stamp. Instead, there is a smooth plant of the heel. The position of the head and eyes indicates that the jumper is concentrating on height. As the athlete rises, the lead leg starts the action of a normal stride. The legs cross to continue normal stride action. Now the lead leg is swung forward so that both legs are high and together for the landing. No technique in the air can propel a man forward, yet the stride in the air does offer several advantages. First, this style affords natural continuity with the takeoff and thus interferes less with lift. Second, it permits control in the air. Third, the legs are swung into landing position with much less stress on the stomach muscles. A good lift plus control and correct action in the air make possible an efficient landing. The feet are both forward, and the task is to keep the heels in the air as long as possible. Good stomach muscles are needed. In keeping up the heels, the limiting factors are falling back or having the hips touch the pit. Experience teaches this critical point. The legs relax, the head is dropped, and the jumper falls forward to an efficient landing. The parts form a whole: run, float, air action, landing. Running speed is an important asset for the candidate. Most of the great jumpers are fine sprinters. All great jumpers are fast men. The more natural speed, the better the outlook. Also, we look for spring. Spring will be needed to obtain the body height so necessary to good performance. Running will be the backbone of early conditioning work. Actual jumping does not begin until there's been several weeks of preliminary training. The candidate trains with the sprinters. As we have seen, takeoff time is relatively brief. A great upward thrust from the board requires power. The serious jumper, therefore, works to develop leg power. In the off-season, special leg exercises, such as leg presses and squats, are carried out 3 times each week. The exercise schedule includes regular work to strengthen the stomach muscles. Strong stomach muscles are needed to keep the legs high during flight and thus obtain the most efficient landing. Running remains the heart of the conditioning program. No practice session is complete unless it includes running. The overall idea of the event held by the athlete will influence his learning. Progress demands that his mental image of the broad jump be correct and clear. He naturally thinks of jumping directly toward the end of the pit. This natural tendency must be eliminated, and the athlete must come to visualize the jump from the board as a pure effort to obtain height, not distance. The coach presents the running broad jump as a high jump at the end of a run. The pop-up is the first approach to jumping. In the pop-up, the athlete runs slowly to permit control. He tries for a solid power position, comfortably balanced over the takeoff foot. The jumping effort is concentrated entirely on lift, not distance. Besides serving as the athlete's introduction to the running broad jump, the pop-up will remain an important drill to be used at all stages of his development. This important learning device offers 2 advantages. Because the approach is slow and under control, the athlete is better able to concentrate on takeoff position. Since takeoff is close to the pit, he is much less anxious to drive forward when jumping. On every pop-up, the athlete concentrates entirely on lift. He should try to feel that he is driving straight up in the air. Distance is ignored. As soon as the pop-ups become comfortable, the athlete is encouraged to add 1 more step. He is asked to try to continue his run in the air. This action is seldom mastered immediately. Early attempts tend to be incomplete. Yet, with patient work, any well-coordinated candidate can learn this style. It is important that the athlete be introduced to the run in the air style early in his training. The jumpers who show great resistance to learning this style are those who have jumped a long time without it. If introduced early and practiced faithfully, this style becomes a strongly ingrained habit. The value of pop-ups as training exercise is as follows. Because the takeoff board is not used, and because the run is slower, conditions are favorable to learn lift. Through many repeated pop-ups, the action necessary for lift becomes habit. With enough drill, this habit becomes strong enough to stand up under the severe pressure of the full run. To make full jumps, check marks must be located. This process takes very little time if the athlete is ready. By ready, it is meant that he is in condition to run and his strides are of consistent length. A marker is placed about 100 feet from the board. Exact location is not important. Starting from this temporary marker, the athlete gathers full speed. There is no effort to hit the board. He does not adjust his stride. The mark made by the stride nearest to the takeoff board is noted. A stick or other marker is put in place. The process is repeated for several more runs. On each trial, the athlete must be mentally up, just as he would be in competition. Nearness to the board makes no difference. It is important only that there is a grouping, that the marks form a cluster. Measurement is made from the center of the markers to the board. This grouping is a good start, but later on, with increased conditioning and a more uniform stride, the markers will be even closer together. The temporary marker is now moved back up the runway, a distance equal to the measurement from the cluster of sticks to the takeoff board. To test his check mark, the athlete must be well warmed up and mentally ready for a full effort. It is important that the test be made without stride adjustment. The athlete should not try to feel for the board. He simply runs through and past the board at the speed he would use to jump. This early check mark is only temporary. With increased learning and conditioning, a longer run will be used. The inexperienced jumper is usually helped by a second check mark. The coach stations himself about 50 feet from the board. In that area, he looks for the nearest spot struck by the jumping foot. Though barely seen by the athlete in competition, the second check mark does provide reassurance. The full-scale jump is the athlete's goal, and therefore a necessary part of his training. Before the competitive season begins, the athlete should practice full jumps about 2 sessions each week. Some training in landing in the pit has already been given by the pop-ups. If other parts of the jump are correct, the landing presents little difficulty. The jumper will learn just how far he can extend his legs without falling backward. In general, a good landing depends on the jumper's alignment at takeoff, a full lift, and his balance and control in the air. These are the factors to be examined if there is chronic landing trouble. Once the earlier parts of the jump are correct, the athlete should quickly learn to land efficiently. Thus, the takeoff is the heart of the running broad jump. A good spring puts the athlete in the air long enough to carry out the rest of the form smoothly. For this reason, the coach constantly draws attention to the takeoff. Only a powerful upward thrust can supply the power needed for an efficient flight. The takeoff action must not only be correct, it must also be fast. A motor skill will hold up under stress and speed only when great habit strength has been developed. Hence the need for concentration and endless practice. Conditions such as a strong wind or a different runway surface can affect stride length. A tailwind, for example, will drive the jumper over the board. If an observer notes the displacement, adjustment for this factor is a relatively easy matter. The first check mark is simply moved back enough to allow for the total displacement caused by the wind. With experience, the jumper learns exactly how much to adjust his second check mark. In general, it is moved about 1/2 of the distance needed for the first mark. Once the adjustments have been made, the jumper ignores conditions and puts his trust in the check marks. Running continues to be part of the workout schedule during the entire season and on every practice day. The broad jumper usually competes in the sprint events and thus works with the sprinters. The special build-up exercises continue, but as the meets draw closer, their intensity is decreased. Also, these exercises are restricted to the early part of the week, so that the jumper will have full spring on the day of competition. The pop-ups, because of their great value in teaching lift, are continued throughout the entire season. With the arrival of the competitive season, the number of full-scale practice jumps is decreased. Yet some jumping must remain on the workout program. Its contribution to learning cannot be completely duplicated by any other drill. It is the only way the entire form can be practiced under conditions of speed and stress. If competition is on Saturday, there should be no jumping after Wednesday. Through all the long hours of training, the athlete has, of course, been looking forward to the day of the meet. Now he experiences the excitement of competition and the satisfaction of knowing that he has prepared well.